Welcome to Vital Talk, a discussion on technology, both in the Chicagoland area and globally. I'm joined here by co-founder of vitaltech, Sean Vitale. I'm Scott Rude. Our subject today, SharePoint. And we can go in so many different directions with it. We're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. Sean's the teacher. I'm definitely the student at best. And hopefully you and I can learn a little bit from the savant mind of Sean. Sean, I want to introduce this all by just explaining briefly what SharePoint is. SharePoint, web-based collaboration and document management platform through highly flexible. It is highly flexible, and it's primarily used to store documents and communicate information across organizations. What part of SharePoint do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for welcoming me and having me on here. It's very cool. I'll have to kind of ramp myself up to match your personality. You're way more exciting about this stuff than I am. But no, this is a passion of mine, so it's really cool that I'm here. It's really all I want to talk about today, just like you said, SharePoint's been around for a long time. It's been around since 2001. I call it sort of a practice management software in the sense that, depending on what type of industry you're in and what your business needs are, you can use the software to help improve the practice of your business. Basically, that's it. So for law firms, they could use it for docketing. They could use it for document management. They could use it for, any firm could use it, or company could use it for expense tracking. They could use it for calendaring. There's a million different ways you can use it. All I want to talk about today, to be really simple, is since 365 has come out with SharePoint, we're seeing a lot more customers, and we're converting a lot more customers from using a local shared server, local shared files on a server, to actually sharing their files and hosting them on SharePoint.
Should we talk about the timeline that has been SharePoint before you get into that file sharing? It started in 2001, and in a lot of aspects, people, I think their perception is that it's like Dropbox, but it is far more integrated. Over time, how would you explain the arc in these last 18 years since inception of SharePoint with Microsoft?
Yeah, good question. So SharePoint, it's always been able to share and store files and report on the files and share versions. A lot of the cool functionality that it has today. The difference now is, the issue with before was you had to use it kind of like a Dropbox experience where you'd work on a file, and until Dropbox had syncing, you'd save it somewhere locally on your computer. And then if you wanted to upload to Dropbox, you had to save it to that folder, or click on the website, click upload file, actually upload the file to Dropbox. If you didn't have an internet, that meant you couldn't do it, which meant you couldn't share it with the team. Blah, blah, blah. Hopefully you kind of see where I'm going. There were a lot of nuisances related to actually sharing files. Now, you can actually share files with SharePoint using what's called Windows Explorer. So I guess I can kind of get in the history of file sharing, just generally how it's been with a lot of firms. So historically, a lot of firms had file servers, and those servers would share files. Of course, there were permissions on those folders and who they shared amongst, but what users would do is they would click on their S drive, they'd click on their U drive, they'd click on the H drive, whatever, and they would access whatever files they needed. The world using a computer got very much used to using that Windows Explorer, and that was the window that you clicked within the Windows operating system to see it. SharePoint, no one liked sharing files with SharePoint because they just hated downloading it to the computer and then re-uploading it back to SharePoint. Now SharePoint actually has an integration with OneDrive to where you can use the Windows Explorer and save files more in the general fashion that people are more used to. So because of that, we're seeing it a lot more prominent in the world, and we're actually pushing clients to go towards it because it's there's a million different benefits which we can kind of get into, but it's a lot more custom to the actions they've typically taken in the past, and it has a lot more benefits than the historical traditional sharing through file servers.
In the myriad of upcoming episodes, Sean will be able to pop up, and even in this episode, to show you what's on his computer, to teach us and have better perspective on whatever the topic is at hand. Today is SharePoint, and in terms of tying a bow on the evolution of it, For about 10 years, free licenses and commercial extensions provided content management capabilities. And then it just continued, Sean, to have an incredible amount of features added to it. Social networking in 2010, cross-browser uploading 2013. It introduced over 50,000 at the Future SharePoint virtual event in 2016. Mobile app was introduced. And I think the most robust movement is actually what's to come in the next 2 years. It just appears that they now see, and this is something we're going to talk about, is that the benefits are going to be coming to a larger share of the consumer. And you can obviously speak on why you think it's been stunted. It's not as synonymous as Microsoft Word or as synonymous as Microsoft Excel, but you feel as if there might be a sea change coming for SharePoint.
Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's because it's, people can save files. People don't like change in IT
Right.
unless it has a ton of benefit, like an extreme apparent benefit. So if there is no apparent benefit, why would I change? If it's not fixed, don't broke it. Or don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it, sorry. It's really hard, especially with the firms that have the money and the funds, like law firms, accounting firms, any professional services. That's just kind of the way that they work. And in some scenarios, that's a great attitude to have. But with, the way SharePoint, all the functionality that SharePoint has, being able to save in the same fashion that you would with a file server, so literally the same way, you're just looking at a different icon that you click within Windows Explorer, it just totally makes sense. Do you want me to get into all the benefits now?
I think that's a great idea. Pros and cons. Let's start with all the positives that come with SharePoint.
Yeah, so, a huge thorn in the side for a lot of our customers that we run into is VPN. Whether you go to a conference, you're staying in a hotel, you're just traveling, you can be at a Starbucks, you try and VPN into the network, and sometimes the VPN works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's just incredibly slow. It just isn't reliable, quite frankly. And if you're preparing for a meeting, if you're at a deposition and you need to pull up notes for the deposition and you just can't because they're saved on the server, that sucks. It really sucks. So the first cool thing that I really like about SharePoint is that you can sync all of your files locally on your computer. So as you're accessing, imagine as you're accessing that H or that U drive or whatever that folder is that you saved the notes for the deposition. What if it was just synced to your folder and you opened it up, to your computer, and you open it up and you worked on it live, and when you're done, you actually don't even have to click save, because when you open a file within SharePoint, it's just automatically saving if you have the new version of Microsoft Office, and then you close it and you're done. You're totally done throughout the day. So the syncing's pretty cool. As I mentioned, it utilizes the same Windows Explorer window that everyone's sort of accustomed to. So just the natural flow of saving is awesome. It's the same exact way that people are used to saving before. Another cool benefit is accessing the file at one time. So for us, this is really cool. We create what's called checklists for implementation. So if we're upgrading computers to Windows 10, we're renaming computers, we're assigning computers to Azure, or adding document libraries in SharePoint. There's a million tasks as we're kind of going through an implementation. We'll have a list of, call it 100 computers, and we have to go through each one of those tasks with the team. Well, it would really stink for a project manager to have each one of the techs that are working on all those tasks email that project manager back 10 different spreadsheets, and then you have to merge all that information into one spreadsheet. With SharePoint, it's just like, a lot of people reference this in Google Docs, even though Microsoft came out with a similar version called OneDrive right about the same time Google Docs came out. But anyways, you can have everybody in that same spreadsheet at one time. So when we're doing implementations, for example, we're doing one for one of our clients right now. I had 2 techs on site, me being the project manager, just kind of managing the project. I was able to open the spreadsheet. The guys were going through as they were completing each task for each computer. It would just put an X in the cell, signifying that it's done. And then because everything's in SharePoint, it's actually another benefit that's really cool. Anyone else that is in, or SharePoint in 365, I should say, I'll clarify that in a second, so remind me to get back to 365 in SharePoint, just kind of traditional SharePoint, Scott. But regardless, when I can actually see exactly what they're doing at the same time, and because the client is also in 365 SharePoint, I can share that file with the client. So she was actually able to open up the file and in real time as she was giving an update to the president of the company, see exactly where we were in the process.
Yeah, SharePoint 365. Anything else you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so SharePoint in 365, and I think that's what SharePoint traditionally wasn't just, it's always been accessible via a web browser, but it really hasn't been hosted anywhere. They kind of went through a phase where it was frequently hosted, but for the most part, everyone that had SharePoint had to have their own physical server on site. They set up SharePoint, and like I said, there's a million different functions related to it, so you could have just tons of developers kind of creating all those functions within SharePoint. But the SharePoint that we're talking about today really is it is 365, and it's with 365. So we're not talking about anything on site and locally, and that's probably going back to why it's becoming more prominent right now. There's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that just don't want that hardware on site anymore. They want to put everything in the cloud. And email was also on a server a long time ago that they've moved to 365. So since SharePoint is just part of that, you're already paying for it. There's no additional cost whatsoever. Why not take advantage of it? You get a free terabyte of space that comes with it, and just move your files over to it and access everything through there.
Maybe it is apropos that maybe now is going to be the time, because the services for SharePoint are becoming far more aligned to what your general consumer cares more about. It is cloud-based. That is becoming far more of a fluent terminology for those that aren't as expert as you are. It's a centralized hub. There's seamless integration within Microsoft Office, within Teams. Document collaboration is there. There's high levels of transparency. It's customizable. I think it's very customizable to your needs. And with more of our lives going into tech, online, to our computer, having everything on our phone, and with OneDrive making storage so simple, I get why this is something people might want to start implementing into their daily life a lot more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we should probably have a podcast itself just related to 365, how businesses can utilize more than just email within 365. To be honest, there's a lot of clients, I feel like now, that especially on the smaller side, they can just run everything, their entire environment off 365, and not just email. They can have security and user accounts and passwords and things. So that could be a podcast just within itself. That could also be tied into cloud versus non-cloud. Why would you have your infrastructure? Why wouldn't you have your infrastructure? But I digress. Yeah, that's the infrastructure point is exactly why why we think this is going to be more prominent. I think people are getting sick of having servers in their environment. They're getting sick of everything just being reliant on those servers. Because if you think about it, if a server's up and running, well, it's got to be somewhat recent. I always relate things to cars all the time. The office gives me crap for it. But the older it gets, there's moving parts, there's moving components, physical components that are just moving on a day-to-day basis. And just like a car, the more you use it, the longer it lives. It starts to just get old after a while. So you need warranties, and you need to pay HP or Dell or IBM or Lenovo or some company to come out and replace those parts as they break. After a while, just like a car, you get sick of it breaking and you have to buy a new one. Servers are expensive, right? No one wants to pay that. So you got to keep up with that warranty. You got to keep the server up. You need power for the thing. Oh my God, if your power runs out, guess what? It doesn't matter how brand new and fresh and great your server is or how robust it is. It's just not even going to run. Not to mention that, working remotely, we haven't even gotten to there. So if you're working remotely, you need to access the server. Forget about the fact that you need an internet, you need a computer and all this stuff on your end. That server needs to be connected to an internet, and that connection itself needs to be up and solid. So just the aspect of housing your own infrastructure and paying and the costs related to that, they kind of go away, those things, when you move to 365. So if you can take all of your files, which is a huge service in everybody's IT environment, right? Everybody shares files. I don't know one business that doesn't have centralized file storage. If they don't, then that's a much bigger problem that we could probably talk about. But um, to take that component and that service and remove it from your environment and not have to worry about that infrastructure, it's a huge, huge benefit.
Sean alluded to his office. He is the founder for vitaltech, who's Chicago's leading provider of outsourced IT services. They're dedicated to delivering a genuine human IT experience. Their slogan, IT made human, through a high energy approach and adaptable products and services. And this is what he handles each day when they bring in new clients. Their whole project is to transition them well, assess their situation, save them money, make their process a lot more enjoyable and smooth. I'm glad to be a part of the team. If you're interested in getting an assessment and benefiting from the services of vitaltech, you can go to our website, which is vitaltechsolutions.com. You can email us at partnerships@vitaltechsolutions.com or call us at 312-815-9291. Now, not all technology, Sean.
How many of those shameless plugs are we going to do on a podcast basis?
Well, you're the boss, so I guess you can quota us.
Just kidding. I like.
Oh, it's a good point.
Plug.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you caught what's over my shoulder.
Just the company name, the logo flashing in multiple colors.
Are there downsides to SharePoint? It's ready to get back on track.
No, it's good. I like the shameless plug, and for I think people listening, obviously we're a business, and that's kind of the point of doing the podcast. But I guess I also hope I'm a tech enthusiast, and I do hope that people get valuable content out of this as well. So we'll try and keep those to a minimum. But if you don't know, Scott is the director of partnerships here, and that is his job. So.
And it's nice. It really is refreshing, though, and from as genuine as I can say it, to see someone's passion also be a service through his business to help others. And I've already seen in shorthand already very quickly that it's an incredible resource. And now I think businesses are finally realizing, especially managed IT, of how much you can get better expertise and there just isn't as much overhead. And I just love our team. I think that it'll be really fun if you check in on different blogs and pods and video blogs that we have some interesting characters. And we'll get to those down the road. Now, in terms of all the benefits we talked about with SharePoint, and obviously Microsoft has far more hits than misses, but no technology is perfect. What are the cons or issues with SharePoint?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple. There's actually a couple more benefits I just want to touch on really quickly before we dig into that. But so like I said, you can share, multiple people can access the file at one time. The cool thing about SharePoint is, as you mentioned earlier, it kind of started as a document management solution. And with any document management solution, there's version history. So now within your files, you actually don't have to save multiple versions. You can, within the file, you just, with a click of a button, you can convert back to, God, it goes back, I don't even know what the limitations on it are, to be honest with you, but you can, every time the file is opened and edited, you can pretty much go back to that revision history. So that's pretty cool. And you can do that within the application itself. So within Word, it's not like you have to open up another tool or log into SharePoint or go down some crazy path. You just, within the, like, it's literally at the top bar of Word. You just click up at the top and kind of, scroll down and you can choose the history. The other really cool thing, and this is something we actually probably need to teach you a little bit on, Scott.
Yeah, bring it.
Is that you no longer have to send attachments, in my opinion, anymore to people. So when, for example, these blog posts, as Scott and I are kind of coming up with ideas for them, and we want to share the ideas with each other, rather than just emailing a file back and forth to one another, you can just send me a link. We both have access to SharePoint and the shared file. You can be in it in the same exact time that I can be in it. And because of that, you really just need to send me the link to the document at one time.
In the upper right-hand corner, when I can see that you're in the process of editing it and we can edit it together.
Yep.
In a way, it's productive,
yep,
but it's also interactive.
Yep, exactly. It's totally interactive. There's even a chatting function from within the document, so you can chat with the person that you're in on it with. So if there's, if you're making an edit that I don't think you could make, I personally would probably switch to Teams and just chat that way. But you can do it right from within the document, and yeah, you can totally collaborate within the file. And so, if we're discussing blogs or we're just writing the blogs, or if we're making revisions, if you're a law firm and you're making a revision to, I don't know, any file that you work on with multiple people, everyone can be in it at one time. And if there's multiple sections that, John has section A, Chris has section B, Joan has section D, you can have all of them in at the same time working on their own sections. They can collaborate with each other and, reference, if there's references between the sections, obviously if it's the same document, they'll probably all relate. And yeah, everybody can totally be in it at one time. If we had Randy on the show, he would very much appreciate me bringing up the link aspect functionality to SharePoint, because if you've transitioned from one email solution to another and sat there waiting for progress bars because of lots of attachments being forwarded back and forth, you'd sympathize with them. But yeah, those are a lot of the benefits that I can honestly think of, and there's a ton more. There really is. There's a lot more with it. And again, all this is you're accessing it the same way you access your traditional file system. Literally the same thing. You just have all these different values, so you can sync it locally, so you don't need VPN anymore. You have all of your files. You can choose if you want to sync it locally. You can choose if you don't want to sync it locally. It utilizes the same Windows Explorer window. Multiple people can be in at the same time. There's version history. You can send links instead of attachments to your email size. Your mailbox is a lot slower. You don't have an IT department nagging you to cut down your mailbox size. You don't have to pay for an archiving solution because people are emailing a million attachments back and forth. You can share it with people outside your organization, if your security allows, and depends on HIPAA compliance and SEC compliance and all the other compliances that exist in the world today. But yeah, there's so many benefits to this solution, having it in the cloud as opposed to the traditional way of just storing files on a file server.
Where would you like to go next, my man?
Downsides?
Is there any? I mean, here's some that I've researched. You tell me to defunct them or not. Searching could be a lot easier. Social elements of the internet could be better. Microsoft warning, again, with customization, hard to maintain and use. And then the cost to implement and customize.
Yeah.
How many of those still warrant or are justified? And which ones do you think Microsoft's been remedying?
I think a lot of those are fixed now. The cost is probably the easiest one to address because it comes with your 365 subscription. You can, if you buy a mailbox license for $5 per user per month, you get SharePoint with it. And you can actually, if you're accessing SharePoint from the web browser, not through Windows Explorer, you can edit and change the documents from within online as well. Yeah, we should probably do kind of a demo one time where we can pull this up in the screen a little.
Sounds great.
Yeah. But there are some downsides to it. So if you think about the fact that you can sync files to your computer, there's configuration settings within it. It uses the OneDrive client to do that, to sync files from SharePoint to your computer. And the one setting that we always recommend is syncing an entire, SharePoint. It's called the document library, but think of it for all purpose as a shared drive. So syncing an entire SharePoint shared drive to the computer. Now, that sounds kind of weird because it's like, well, I don't need everything synced to my computer. Well, there's a cool function in there. I think it's called Files on Demand within OneDrive, and it's kind of a smart sync within there. So it only syncs the things that you're using. I know I'm supposed to be talking about downsides here, and that very much relates to it. But that fact alone, you can sync, and you could be in and out of a lot of files that are syncing within SharePoint constantly. And if you're doing that, all of the users have to kind of learn how to use all of that functionality that I just talked about. They need to know what to sync, how to unsync, because there's limited storage on users' computers. And if they're syncing their entire shared drive just because, for whatever the reason is, they're going on vacation and they're just like, I don't know, I need everything. I just want to sync it all. So if they're not putting any, foresight into that, they're going to run out of space and they're going to run into a bunch of problems. So I guess a couple of things there. One is I think it's mostly just related to training, but you have to train the users to properly use it. You have to know how to use it yourself. I think it's beneficial to have a couple people within the company or kind of like the go-to people to know how this works. If you're implementing it with your IT service provider, you should at least have a couple demos of that. so they can use it. And while you're implementing it, and whoever the tech is touching the computer and setting up the document library for you, the shared folder within SharePoint for you, they should just kind of quickly go over these things so you just have some idea how to do it. So there's some training aspect that's necessary, I'll say, in order to effectively use the solution without running into many issues. Permissions are a big deal. I also mentioned you can share it without people outside your organization. Talked about the compliances, HIPAA, SEC, there's a million different ones out there. A lot of businesses are going to 365 right now, and if you're Azure, so the permissions are controlled by what's called Azure Active Directory, and that's just, you get that also as well as 365 Azure Active Directory. And what Active Directory does, again, this is also a local server that you can set up in your environment, that's set up in a lot of environments today still. It controls the usernames and passwords and permissions. So sroot is a username and password. Sroot has access to these files and folders. Sroot has access to this mailbox. Here's his primary one, so on and so forth. Imagine if you could apply those permissions to somebody outside your environment. So now you're kind of, we have this bubble at vitaltech, and we can kind of control and create policies and oversee everybody from within vitaltech and the files that they're using. But if I'm extending that bubble to somebody else's organization, I don't employ or I don't manage that person. Hopefully it's just a client of ours, and sure, we do kind of manage it, but I don't have ultimate say in what they do. Do they have virus software? Do they not have antivirus software? There's just, it has to be set up appropriately, and the permissions have to be discussed and with the appropriate person within the organization to make sure that they're set up in a way to where you're not jeopardizing security. That's all.
Closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Any additional tidbits that we should be knowing about SharePoint, and to those out there that are considering to making SharePoint a larger part of their day-to-day?
Yeah. Sorry, all this talking makes me thirsty. It's still exposed to the same securities that you have with a lot of the local solutions, file storage solutions, local Active Directory solutions. So you're still exposed to viruses. Not that this would happen to me, but if I got a virus on my computer and it encrypted the files on my computer, especially because the files are syncing to my computer, those files within SharePoint will be encrypted as well. And then if you, Scott, wanted to access the same file, the blog file, for example, that we go back and forth on, you're not going to be able to see it. So there's viruses. You're still affected by them. Just because things are in the cloud doesn't mean you're necessarily not affected by viruses. So have really good antivirus software on your computers. Make sure it's up to date and all those things. If it gets a virus, you need to be able to restore that. There's a remediation action that needs to kind of take place. And you need to make sure that your solutions are backed up. So just like you backed up your local file server before in case the server crapped out, you need to back up the SharePoint solution in case it gets encrypted. Other than just encrypting files, there's a ton of phishing emails out there that exist out in the world, and someone could email me. It could look totally legit, like a Microsoft 365 email, and I might click and put in my username and password to that. If just by doing that, now somebody has access to whatever I have access to, my mailbox, my SharePoint, my Teams, any wiki pages I've set up, tons of data and information from within the organization. They could encrypt or purge or delete or expose that information to the public, the black web, or the dark web, as people like to call it, or just anywhere in the public, basically. So what we recommend to kind of prevent those situations is just enforcing passwords, somewhat strict passwords, and something called multi-factor authentication, so that when you log into your computer, you have a strict password, and if it's a new computer you're accessing it from, so if I did type in the username and password from my computer and somebody from outside tried to type in from another computer, the multi-factor authentication would kick in, and it would say, hey, I need to validate, since this is a new computer, that it's actually you, in which case it can send a text, or there's different apps or applications that you can use to allow that access.
Great perspective, and we're so thankful to have Sean a part of this Vital Talk. We will provide far more segments. We look forward to helping as much as possible. That's why we're doing this. VitalTech is about making IT made human, and through it all, we understand that the better your technology, the easier your daily life at work and at home is. So thank you for watching us. If you need more information, you can go to our website at www www.vitaltechsolutions.com. For Sean, I'm Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.